Hey, welcome to Janktown. Will here, thanks for stopping by, and I've got a pretty long game for you. For this game, Bob is humaning it up with Jirina to rep Ikoria, Martin is fighting with Faldorn even if he's exiled all the way in Baldur's Gate, I'm trollololing with Saruman, and I made a long deck tech for him which you can check in the description down below, and finally, Gerald is punching the Faithless with Temmet straight out of Amonkhet. Time to make your picks. Who do you think comes out on top? The battle across the multiverse begins on turn 1. Bob starts out with Mountain and his Jirina deck rallies a whole bunch of humans together to overwhelm with numbers. Martin plays a Cinderglade tapped and his Faldorn is all about creating a mountain of card advantage by playing out of exile. I start with an Arcane Sanctum and my Saruman deck wants to draw cards and cast second spells so I can turn my opponent's spells against them and let him know how foolish it is to take on the might of Isengard. Gerald plays the Plains, and his Temmet is about getting in with unblockable tokens, throwing equipment on them, and getting all kinds of nasty combat triggers. Bob plays the Plains and passes, and it's been a pretty benign start. Martin plays a Command Tower and casts the first spell of the game, Llanowar Elves. He follows this up by suspending Search for Tomorrow, a rampant growth that'll come into play a couple of turns from now. I play an Exotic Archer, and I responsibly ramp as well, playing a Dimir Signet. Gerald plays an island and follows a similar pattern of ramping with Azorius Signet. This is the way to ramp for non-green decks. Bob plays an unclaimed territory, naming humans, and he gets on board with an Audacious Thief, essentially a Phyrexian arena on a body. Martin takes down the Search on his upkeep, and for his land, he plays a Raging Ravine. He then plays his commander out, Faldorn Dreadwolf Herald. I hope you guys like wolves, because there'll be a lot of them in this game. I receive the turn and I play a Mystic Gate. I have 4 mana on turn 3, but my opening hand had 6 lands, so I don't really have much to play at this point. Gerald plays a Skycloud Expanse, a Signet in land form, and he casts Blade of Shared Souls for Mirrodin! A 2/2 comes into play with it, but with no other creatures, it's just a vanilla 2/2. Bob receives the turn and he plays a budget classic, Evolving Wilds. He then plays out a Soul Ring on turn 4, still pretty good, and he taps 3 to play Professional Facebreaker. He then moves to combat. He sends the Thief at me, and this draws Bob a card and loses him a life upon attack. I take the 2 and Bob creates a treasure since he broke my face. Bob then cracks his Evolving Wilds and searches out a swamp before passing. The last counter comes off Search for Tomorrow and Martin plays this out of exile. This creates him a wolf as he searches a land into play. He then plays Brazen Cannonade, a post-combat card advantage engine, before he moves to combat. He swings Faldorn at Bob, who takes it, and in post-combat, Martin exiles his own Soul Ring, which he plays, creating him another wolf. He then plays out a mountain, and before end of turn, I cast Brainstorm and cook up a plan for my next turn. I play a Plains and cast Secret Rendezvous. I feel as if I'm already on the back foot, and since Gerald has so far been the most benign with me, I target him and we both draw 3. I pass the turn discarding down a hand size and I discard an Echo of Eons. Gerald plays an island and brings out his commander, Temmet. He moves to combat and buffs his 2/2 token, making it an unblockable 3/3, and he swings at the obvious threat, Martin, who has just put a ton of power on his board during his last turn. Gerald then discards down a hand size as well, discarding a Blacksmith skill before passing. Bob ramps with a Chromatic Lantern and he casts Adeline. This has to be one of the best cards in his deck because it'll just poop out so many 1/1s. So I felt like I had to do something before this card just outright overwhelms the table, and I cast Mana Drain, countering Adeline. Bob moves to combat and he swings the Thief at me, unsurprisingly, but he swings the Facebreaker at Gerald. The Thief draws him another card, and with no blocks declared, both Gerald and I take 2 from the attacks. Bob creates 2 more treasures, giving him 3 total, and for the second main, he plays a Swamp, followed by a Talisman of Hierarchy. At end of turn, Gerald plays a Swords to Plowshares, giving Faldorn a taste of exile. Martin gains 3 life and sends his commander back to the command zone, then Gerald cycles away an irrigated farmland. Martin isn't phased though, and he immediately plays Faldorn again, paying the 5. He swings the wolves at Gerald, and Gerald takes 4. In post-combat, he exiles an Outpost Siege thanks to Brazen Cannonade. He plays the Forest and then plays the Siege, choosing Khans, aka the Exile Junior Upkeep mode. This creates him another wolf from Faldorn's ability, and he passes. I draw for turn and I play a Swamp. Then with 3 floating mana from Mana Drain, I use that to play out Saruman. I have many colors, so watch out! For my second spell, I flash back my Echo of Eons out of my graveyard, and the players mill too, but ultimately, I decide to cast Swords to Plowshares. And since Faldorn loves Exile so much, I send her back there. This gains Martin another 3 life, and finally the Echo resolves. We all shuffle our graveyards and hands, and I say bye-bye to my hand full of lands as everybody draws a new grip. I then pass the turn. Gerald plays a Plains for his land, and he plays out a Sword of Fortune Frontier. It has protection from red and green, aka Martin's deck. He equips it onto Temmet, and then he moves to combat. He buffs his Rebel token, making it unblockable, and then he swings all out at Martin. Martin takes the 7, and the sword triggers. Gerald exiles the top 2 cards of his library, and it reveals a land and Shram. He plays an island, not that land, and he passes his turn, letting both of them go to exile while still having 2 untapped lands. Oh god, an Azorius player with 2 untapped blue mana. Bob plays a Windbrisk Heights, and he hides away a secret card. He then pays 5 to cast his commander, no, not his real commander, but Commander Liara Porter. This is his own card advantage engine out of exile, and there's just so many things coming out of exile in this game. I don't know. He swings the Facebreaker at me and the Thief at Martin, and the Thief triggers, drawing him a card, and we move to blocks. Martin trades a Wolf for the Thief, and I take 2. From the Liara trigger, Bob exiles a Shared Animosity. And man, this game has just been bomb after bomb for him. Bob plays it for 1 with a mana discount, and he cashes in 2 treasures plus his remaining mana for his real commander, Jirina. She brings with her a human friend who's just a friend, and with her yeah, she gives him +2/+0, yeah. But anyway, his board is looking mighty scary. Martin starts his turn, and on his upkeep, he exiles a Delayed Blast Fireball. Whoo, the board wipe the realm needs. Before that though, he casts Tovolar, Dire Overlord, and he moves to combat, swinging 2 wolves back at Gerald. Gerald takes the 4, and Martin draws 2 thanks to Tovolar. In post-combat, he exiles a Wayward Swordtooth, which he plays, follows up with a Forest, and finally he casts Delayed Blast Fireball, wiping all of our boards off. Just before I celebrate though, Gerald steps in with his own mana drain, and all the juice out of that fireball goes away. Martin plays his last spell for his turn, and he sends a Beanstalk Giant out for an adventure, ramping him a forest. He then plays another land, and then passes. I receive the turn and play a Morphic Pool. Then for my first spell, I cast a Thran Dynamo. I tap it, and for my second spell, I play Starscream. Converted, of course. I'm all about that universe's beyond, baby. Saruman of many franchises. I asked Bob if he said it my way, and he gives me a non-committal answer, so I have to do it. I cast the just counter Delayed Fireball Blast out of exile, and I do the wiping, plus 5 damage to my opponent's face. My board survives, plus Temmet thanks to the sword's protection, and I move to combat and swing at Martin for 2 with Starscream, and he becomes the Monarch. Gerald casts Emery, and this mills him 4, but he hits no artifacts from his self-mill. He then casts Lion Sash, and this is just responsible graveyard hate, which my deck hates. He then uses the remaining floating mana from Mana Drain to equip the Lion Sash on a Temmet, and before moving to combat, he exiles a couple of permanents from Martin's graveyard to add some +1/+1 counters. He swings the 6/6 Temmet at Martin, and he snatches the crown. The sword triggers, and he gets both a land and a Staff of Titania. Gerald plays the exiled plains, and he also casts the staff. Before end of turn, Bob flashes in a Call of Coppercoats, making him 2/1/1 humans. Not the biggest value, but it's okay. Gerald draws for Monarch before finally passing the turn. Bob plays a Path of Ancestry, and he calls on Jirina's daddy, General Kudro, to buff his board. Plus, it's another graveyard hate piece, and I swear, my opponents are too responsible. He then plays a Moorland Rescuer, a 6-drop which can essentially resurrect his own board when it dies. And man, I hate to do it, but I cast Mana Drain again! Yes, I got it back from my Echo of Eons. This is the only counterspell in my deck, and I hit it twice! What are the odds? Bob splits his attacks, and he sends 1 at Martin and 1 at Gerald. They both take 3, and Bob takes the crown for himself. He draws at his end step before passing. Martin triggers the outpost again, and on his upkeep, it nets him a Champion of Lambolt. He then plays Faldorn for 7, and then a Bloodbraid Elf. The elf cascades him into an exploration, and he casts it, creating a wolf. He then enters combat, swinging at Bob with the elf, and with no blocks, Bob takes 3. The Cannonade triggers post-combat, and Martin now exiles a Mosswork Bridge, which he plays and hides away a card. This also creates him a wolf, and then he moves to end step, drawing for Monarch. I make it back to my turn, and for my first spell, I cast Jace's Archivist. Then I use the 6 mana from Mana Drain and cast 1 with the Multiverse. The art even looks like it's got Saruman on it, so I think it's just a flavor win. My opponent's mill 2, and I hit a Nature's Claim, using it to blow up the Shared Animosity. I wasn't sure if this one was the right choice. Maybe I should have hit one of Martin's card advantage engines, but the Shared Animosity is a game ender, so I went with it. The removal spell resolves, but unfortunately I walked straight into Gerald's counterspell, which stops me from being one with the Multiverse. I move to combat and I hit Martin again with the Starscream, making me the Monarch, and converting Starscream to his front side. I then pass, draw for Monarch, and shoot Bob for 2 with Starscream's ability. Gerald draws for his turn, and on his first main, he casts Armored Sky Hunter. He then attaches the Blade of Shared Souls onto Emery, and she then becomes a copy of the just casted Armored Sky Hunter. He also equips the Staff of Titania onto Temmet, and moving to combat, he swings the Temmet at Martin, who can't block it thanks to the sword, and he swings the Emery Sky Hunter at me. He gets the Sky Hunter's attack trigger, and he finds another sword, the Sword of Feast and Famine, another Sofaf. He attaches the sword for free onto Temmet, giving it another +2/+2. He also gets a Titania trigger, creating a 1/1 Dryad, and this too adds 1 power onto Temmet. Before blocks though, I flash in Thrix, and I block Emery, killing the 3/3 flyer, and I get to keep my crown for at least 1 more turn. Martin can't block though, and so all in all, he takes 9 more from Temmet, and this brings him to 19 commander damage. I did not see this Voltron strategy unfolding. What happened to the tokens? The swords trigger, and Martin has to discard a card, while Gerald untaps all his lands. Gerald then exiles 2, revealing Helm of the Host and Knight of the White Orchid. For his second main, he plays a Razor Tide Bridge, a tapped artifact land, and then afterwards he casts Knight of the White Orchid and he searches out the most expensive card in his deck, a Tundra. He also plays the Helm of the Host and passes the turn. Bob plays a Myriad Landscape tap, a bit late for the ramp land, but he goes for an asymmetric wipe with a city-wide bust. In response, Gerald activates the Lion Sash 1 more time to exile my 1 with the Multiverse. The board wipe for the big boys happens, and the Sash returns back to being a creature as it falls off. To note, Gerald sends Temmet to the graveyard, and then Bob casts Fireflux Squad, scrying for Path of Ancestry, and he does the ultimate value play and scries to the bottom. I swear man, I love scrying to the bottom. General Kudro triggers and he exiles Temmet, respecting the Embalm. He moves to combat and he swings out at me. The Fireflux Squad ability triggers and he exiles 1 of the tokens, which gets replaced with a Magus of the Wheel. I take all 11 damage, going down to 23, and I lose the Monarchy in the process. Finally, Bob gets to activate his Windbrisk Heights, and the card hidden away was Mishra, claimed by Gix. He isn't running the Dragon engine in his deck, but the unmelded version is pretty great for his go-wide strategy. He then passes as he draws for Monarch. Outpost Siege triggers again on Martin's upkeep, and he gets an Izuri's Predation, another board wipe. He plays a mountain and activates Faldorn, discarding to exile a Containment Construct. On his first main, he plays a Wild Magic Sorcerer, giving his first spell from Exile Cascade. The first spell is Izuri's Predation. So we're about to eat another board wipe, because all we're left with are small creatures, but it cascades into a Volcanic Torrent, another board wipe, and another Cascade spell. The Torrent then cascades into Demon Bolt, and finally the loop stops. The bolt shoots at the Lion Sash, and with the Volcanic Torrent on the stack, Bob sacrifices 2 of his humans to General Kudro, and he takes down his own Mishra. The Torrent resolves, and this wipes out all of Martin's opponent's boards, so ironically, Izuri's Predation, when it resolves, does nothing, creating 0 beasts since none of us have creatures. Still, he created 3 wolves out of all of that, so not so bad. Martin then moves to combat, splitting his attacks. He swings a wolf at Bob to claim the Monarch, and then 5 damage gets sent to Gerald. For his second main, he casts the Adventure Side of Embereth's Shield Breaker, which shatters Gerald's Forge of Frontier. He then draws for Monarch as he passes the turn. I start my turn and I'm kinda out of gas. All these board wipes have hurt me, and I have nothing good left in my hand. I first cast Saruman, and then for my second spell, I cast Dark Deal, which wheels everybody's hands away -1. For Saruman's trigger, I get some creatures, casting Bob's Call of the Coppercoats, and I create 9 1/1 humans to match Martin's board. Of course, his are 2/2s, mine are 1/1, so I'm not feeling great. Dark Deal then resolves, and with Gerald and Martin having only 1 card in hand, they draw 0. Meanwhile, I draw only 1, and Bob draws 3. It sounds like card disadvantage, but I think it was a good call. I discarded a land and a targeted bounce spell, but Gerald discarded a grafted exoskeleton and Martin discarded a Toski, which could have refilled his hand real quick. Bob discarded Adeline and Ethereal Absolution, which would have wrecked my Call of the Coppercoats. So, pretty good. With nothing else, I passed the turn. Gerald starts his turn, recasting Temmet from the command zone, and he equips it with Helm of the Host. This creates a non-legendary token of it, and Gerald buffs the token and swings at Martin, and it attacks for 3 damage. Unfortunately though, the token doesn't count towards commander damage even if it has the same name, and Martin survives it at 6. We also miss the Monarch here, and Gerald forgets to draw. Sorry about that. Bob plays a Mountain and then follows it up with Vanquisher's Banner. Not a bad way to begin the rebuild. He then calls on his commander, Jirina, and she re-enters the fray with 2 humans. He scries, but this time gives up the value and keeps the card on top. He also draws with the banner, and that's it for him, so he passes the turn. Martin's Outpost exiles a Noise Marine, and he starts his turn by activating Faldorn again, discarding to exile a Farseek off the top. He then casts Beanstalk Giant from exile, and this gets a Cascade trigger thanks to the Wild Mage Sorcerer. He cascades into Natural Reclamation, targeting Gerald's Sword of Feast and Famine. It's a famine over there right now on Gerald's board. The Reclamation then cascades into a Tectonic Giant, and after the stack clears, Martin has created 3 more wolves. He reveals what's under his Mossworth Bridge, and he gets a Layla plus a wolf. He also casts the Noise Marine, and this cascades into a Xenagos the Reveler, getting 2 more wolves. The Marine deals 5 to Gerald's face, bringing him down to 12, and then he moves to combat. He swings out at Gerald for 16, while also attacking Bob for 5. All the combat damage goes through, and Gerald gets taken out by a bunch of wolves. KO! On his second main, the Cannonade triggers, and this exiles an Urabrask. He takes up Xenagos to get his mana, and he casts Urabrask, netting him another wolf before moving to end step. He draws for Monarch, and this isn't bad at all for a guy who entered the turn with 0 cards in hand. I'm not so fortunate, and I'm still running on empty. I cycle away my Rafine's Tower, main phase cycle, you gotta love it, and I cast the spell I draw into, Temporal Mastery. At least I'm guaranteed 1 more turn, but since I'm almost tapped out, I just move to my second turn where I untap, draw, and very uneventfully, I make a land drop. I then pass the turn. Bob plays the Plains and then an Adriana Captain of the Guard, which draws him a card, but also comes in tap thanks to Urabrask. He then plays Disciple of Bolas, another human, and he sacrifices Adriana. He draws for the banner, then draws 7 more while gaining 7 life. Afterwards, he blitzes in Jaxis, which draws him another card, and in the face of death, he goes down swinging, attacking his 2/4/2 humans at Martin, who trades away with 2 wolves. Bob sacrifices Jaxis at his end step, and he draws another card before discarding down to hand size. Martin exiles a Sylvan Library on his upkeep, and honestly, the way it's looking, the board's only hope is if Martin casts it, passes his turn, takes his upkeep, and pays 8 life. Anyway, he activates Faldorn again, exiling Durnan. He casts Durnan from exile, and thanks to the Wild Mage Sorcerer, cascades into a Dire Fleet Daredevil. He plays a Terminate from Bob's graveyard, and this shoots down Jirina. He then casts Sylvan Library. Woo! Our win con is getting closer and closer. And then he follows it up with Emberth Shieldbreaker. All these spells came from exile, so all in all, he creates 5 more wolves, all with haste. He moves to combat and he sends all 14 wolves at Bob, a total of 28 damage, and he swings the rest at me. Lots of triggers to resolve before blocks and combat damage. Layla triggers, exiling a mountain. Durnan's attack triggers, but Martin whiffs, the rare times he's whiffed in this game. Tectonic Giant triggers, and he exiles a Roar of Resistance from the top of his library. Bob has no blocks, and he gets taken out by the wolves as well. KO! A lot of wolf-related deaths in this game, and meanwhile, I assign blockers trying to take down as many creatures as I can, while still surviving with some low life total. I kill Urabrask in the process, and Martin moves to his second main. The Cannonade exiles Ignite the Future, and he upticks Xenagos, essentially creating 20 more mana. He casts Ignite the Future, then he plays a Facebreaker from exile, followed by a Thunderfoot Baloth. He then flashbacks Ignite the Future, and from this new set of 3, exiles Passionate Archaeologist. And for the killing blow, he casts Triumph of the Hordes. It isn't the Infect that kills me, it's the fact that it has 4 mana value. With Faldorn out, the Archaeologist spits the 4 damage at my face, and Martin takes the win. And that's it for this episode. Congrats to Martin and everyone else who picked him in the pre-game. That was a crazy showing from his Faldorn deck, and he didn't actually have to do too much to upgrade it. That pre-con was built really well, and so shouts out to Wizards. Also, it was a pretty cool way to lose the Triumph of the Hordes, not in the usual infect way that we all know and love, or hate. If you enjoyed this game, make sure to let us know with a like and subscribe, it really helps the channel out. But for now, stay inspired friends, and I'll see you next time.